Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started here in just about 2 minutes. If you would take a moment and, tell us who you are and where you're coming from so we know who's in the room with us today. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today for another one of our Beyond School Hours National Education Conference follow-up webinars. We are really excited to have everyone with us today, and it's August, so we appreciate your time. And I just want to introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Seary. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Development at Foundations, Inc. Before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of background about Foundations. We are a national education nonprofit. We're located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Our mission is to improve the quality of education by strengthening the skills of educators. So we work across the school day. We work in after-school programs with schools at the district level and even at the state level in order to create a brighter future for every child every day. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about Foundations, Inc., you can take a minute to follow us on social media or check out our website, and Paula will make sure that that information is in the chat for you. You might already know us from our signature professional learning experience, the Beyond School Hours Conference. Our conference is held each year in February, and in 2023, we're going to be back in Orlando, Florida from February 9th to the 12th. And we hope that you will all join us. So please check out the registration is open, and we would love to see you in Orlando in February. So again, we are so thrilled to have you, and we are also thrilled to have one of our amazing team members from Foundations with us today. Hilary Jones is an education specialist in the Center for After School and Expanded Learning, and Hilary is going to provide some practical techniques that after-school program staff can use actively to support the learning that students are doing during the school day. So thanks, Hilary, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. So welcome. I'm glad you're all here. I'm excited to have you with me today as we talk about aligning with the school day. And this is really something that's key to how we improve our program outcomes. So I'm going to share with you 4 really simple ways that you can use in your program that anybody can use to help do this and improve your program's outcomes and performance. As Elizabeth said, my name is Hilary. I'm an education specialist at Foundations. So I have the opportunity to do training, coaching, and evaluation for out-of-school time programs. I have been a program director for out-of-school time programs for 8 years, and then prior to that was a school day teacher. And so I've gotten the opportunity to see how those things really come together and have some ideas to share with you around how to make those connections with what's happening in school and in your program to help your students grow and improve. Because whether you're a school day teacher or whether you're an out-of-school time practitioner, you have the same goals. You're trying to grow your students into young people that are successful for their future. And that's really what this is all about. I work in the Center for After School and Expanded Learning, and we really work to offer training, conferences, presentations to people, as well as coaching and evaluation services to help you improve your programs so that you are making a difference in the lives of the young people. Today, we're going to take some time to really understand how to support those school day goals and how to design programming that's aligned with standards. So we'll dig into those standards just a very little bit. And then we're going to talk about creating partnerships that are effective with school day teachers and with staff. I'm sure that you are all Zoom experts by now, but just so that you are ready, we are going to be using a couple of features in Zoom today. The Annotation Tool is one of them. You can grab it up at the top, and then also we will be using some reactions. So just get ready to chat with us, use your chat box, etc. So let's get started. you can grab your annotation tool. You should see it right above the green bar that says you are viewing Hilary Jones's screen. You can see that tool and grab yourself a stamp, because what I would like to ask you to do right this moment is let us know, who are you? So what is your role, whether you're a director, site coordinator, program staff, or other, and then also what age of students are you working with? So grab your annotation tool, give us a stamp, let us know who you are, what age of students you're working with. It helps as we talk today, as we think about some different examples or scenarios. I've got a pretty balanced age group between K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, a few less, maybe 9 to 12, but still some there. And then a little bit of a mix of what other people are doing. And if you marked other, I'd love to know what you do. What is it that brought you here? Why are you joining us? And what is your experience with us today? So as we keep going in our session today, sorry about that. Sorry about that. So as we talk about our active alignment in academic standards today, I want you to think about 4 different things, and we're going to walk through each of these in our session today. But we're going to talk about supporting how students learn and being very intentional about that. Oftentimes, our school day teachers don't have the time to build that every aspect of that in, and we can support and grow that in what we do. We're going to talk about connecting with standards, being very intentional about making those connections in a way that's still fun, that's still informal, that doesn't take away the heart of what out of school time is, but also makes that direct connection. And then we're going to talk about facilitating 21st century learning, as well as using communication to make that connection, to make that impact and that alignment with the schools. But let's start by looking at how we can support how students learn. And we're going to think about 4 major learning modalities as we talk about that today. And they are auditory, visual, tactile, and kinesthetic. And sometimes people talk about 5 learning modalities. Sometimes we use different names for these. Sometimes we call these learning styles. But I really am going to encourage you to think about it today as a learning modality. Some students primarily function in one modality, then that's where we think about learning styles. But most of us learn best through a balance of 2 or 3. And so we best support our students in their learning when we use multiple modalities in our activity design. And that's important because sometimes in the school day, there isn't time for that, there isn't space for that. And one of the ways that we can help support that alignment is by giving students more opportunities to practice that are effective for them in their learning in order to increase that opportunity for them to grow those skills. And that's alignment with the school day through these modalities. So let's dig into that a little more. The first is auditory. So when we learn auditorily, we ascertain the real meaning of words by listening to what someone's saying, listening to audible signals like changes in tone, whether you're going fast or slow, emphasizing something, right? All of that is part of that. When memorizing information, to learn it auditorily, we say it out loud and then remember how it sounded to recall it. We also use effective listening as part of our auditory learning. It's where we take in information through telling stories or listening to stories, and it's all sound or voice oriented. You may see an auditory learner moving their lips or talking to themselves to help them accomplish a task. I am definitely one of those that if you see me moving my mouth and no words coming out, it's because I'm running something in my brain. But you may not be like that. That may not work for you. But consider that some of our students need that opportunity. I'm going to show you a quick example of what that looks like. And this example is from the movie Matilda. And it's how to use auditory learning to teach spelling. So let's watch a little clip and you're going to see how Miss Honey does it.
Get up! Can you spell?
Miss Honey taught us how to spell a long word yesterday. We can spell difficulty.
You couldn't spell difficulty if your life depended on it.
She taught us with a poem.
A poem? How sweet. What poem would that be?
Mrs. D, Mrs. I. Mrs. FFI, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. LTY.
Why are all these women married? Mrs. D, Mrs. I, you're supposed to be teaching spelling, not poetry.
Okay, so a kind of funny example, but you can see for some of these students, it helped a difficult word click in their brain because they heard it in that poem, in that song. It's one of the reasons why songs stick in our heads in ways that spoken content doesn't always do it. But auditory learning is one of the things that we need to embed into our programs to help our students learn the skills that we are hoping for them to experience. The next is visual. Some students rely heavily on visual learning. They're show me and I'll understand. They benefit from a diagram or a chart, something on the wall, right? That helps them remember, as well as written directions. They may need a to-do list. They may need rules posted on the wall or an assignment book. But some of us really need that visual component. And that can be quite a challenge in some of our programs. I visited recently a couple of programs where one of the challenges they were facing is it's not their space. And so it's hard to put something up on the wall. And we were talking about what the challenge is around students posting on the wall rules or something else like that, and the need for that in their day and in their routines to support their learning. So I want you to think about this. Take a look at this picture. Let us know, what modalities do you think that the students in this picture are experiencing right now? So we've talked about two, right? We've talked about auditory and we've talked about visual. What modalities do you think students in this picture are experiencing? You can just drop it in the chat for me. What kind of learning do you think is occurring? Is it auditory? Is it visual? Is it something we haven't gotten to yet? Yep, okay, I got a couple visuals there. There you go. So yes, reading things, taking a written word is visual learning, and we need to include that in what we do. And sometimes in out of school time, it's easy to say, well, they've looked at their computer all day, or they've looked at books all day, or they've looked at whatever they're doing all day, and we've got to do something different. But really, we need to make sure that we're integrating that into what we're doing. Let's talk about the next piece is tactile. And so why I talk this time, I'm going to say to you, grab a piece of paper if you have something nearby, a pen, and I'll challenge you to just doodle or draw something as I talk for a minute, right? So grab your pencil, grab your pen, grab your paper, whatever. But take a moment and think about tactile learning as you do that. It occurs through touching and through doing. And we understand and we remember things through physical movement. It's hands-on, and when we touch or move or build or draw, it's through that we remember things. That's why if you're involved in music, that you practice, right? You practice the piano if you play the piano. You practice your flute if you play the flute. All of that has to do with the tactile piece of the physical touch. It also has to do with auditory and some other mixed approaches, but it's important to think about bringing in every piece of what we do into the learning that's occurring. So take a look at this picture. Got another picture for you. What learning modalities do you think the student in this picture is experiencing? Go ahead, give it to me in the chat. I got one tactile and visual. There you go. And you can have both. She's got the book in front of her. She may be looking at something, but there's also the pad of paper. There's something being written down, right? You've got multiple pieces going on here. Now, we're in out of school time. You may not want to have your kids sitting with a book in front of them and a piece of paper in front of them all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we can draw each of those pieces in different ways. Let's think about kinesthetic learning, right? This is learning that utilizes movement to increase our understanding. So it's activities that may include a chemistry experiment or art or acting. And it's the way learning occurs by using their body to express a thought or an idea or a concept. I was talking a little bit before we started with Paula and Elizabeth about the arts, and we were talking about dance. And dance is a beautiful imagery of this in our programs of ways we can do this, because the kinesthetic learning is how we express the thoughts or the ideas of the music, but there's also the other pieces too, right? We have the auditory part where we hear the rhythms of the music and we know how we're supposed to move. But there's also the visual, our dance teachers, I used to work at a program where we had a strong dance program, and the dance teachers, sometimes they would have the students look in the mirror in the dance studio, right? So that they can see the movements that are occurring. And sometimes, especially as they got closer to performances, would make them flip around and turn away from the mirrors because they needed to learn that in other ways. And so each piece of these 4 components of learning can be integrated into your program in different ways. So look at this picture. I've got one more for you. And let me know, what modalities do you think that the students are experiencing in this picture? What do you think? We know the answer can be more than one of them. How many do you think you see? Well, we can't see auditory for sure, but you might assume that, right? There looks like there's some communication going on. Kinesthetic, right? There's some touching of something that they're working on there. They're all looking at the same thing. So there must be something visual there that's drawing their attention, right? All of the pieces are there. And so really probably you can see all 4 if we're assuming the auditory, which we can't hear through a picture, right? So now I'll ask you one more thing. Which of these classrooms do you want to be in? Where do you want to be? Do you want to be in classroom 1 where you're looking at the book and writing on the paper? Do you want to be in classroom 2 where you're working in the group and all working on a project together? Or do you want to be in 3 where you're just looking at the book? I got a lot of 2s, and I think that's very true of our students too, that the majority of them want to be in 2, but it's also important just to recognize in our students that some of them may need that 3 moment where they have a moment to themselves to sit and read a book, especially if it's been a long day, right? And so it's important that there's multi-modal learning. It's not just one, that all 4 pieces are drawn into what we're doing. So I'll ask you this. Which do you need to use more of in your program? Grab your annotation tool, get it ready, and think about the 4 learning modalities. Think about your program activities. Which do you need to utilize more in your planning? Is there something that you're missing in your current programming that you say, as I'm thinking about active alignment, I need more of this? If you've answered that question, if you've put your star or your stamp right there, then I'll ask you to think about, do you have a favorite activity that utilizes all 4 modes? And I'd love to hear you share something in the chat that you love to do that uses all 4 learning modalities. I got a bunch of kinesthetic learners, some visual coming. So as you consider what you're missing in that piece, just remember to continue to draw each one in. And whether it's something simple like dance, you may do that, or a STEM activity like we have the example in the chat. A STEM activity is a great way to draw in all 4 components of that when done well, and just making sure we're intentional in the design of what we're doing is one simple way that we can support what's happening in the school day. The next way that we can support active alignment with what's happening in the school day is a connection with the standards. Standards are things that all of our students should be working towards. We should be working towards them, but so should our students, so should the schools. And so we're going to think a little bit about that today. But first, I've got kind of a silly activity for you to get us thinking about, and we'll use it as our example. So we're going to try this activity and look at how it connects with the standards. So this activity is called the 437 challenge. And in the challenge, you roll a die 3 times and you try to organize the 3 numbers you get as to a number that's as close to 437 as possible. So in my example, I did the sample. I rolled a virtual die 3 times and I got the numbers 6, 3, and then 1. But as you can see in my sample that I put on the screen, I rearranged the numbers and I put 3 in the hundreds place, 6 in the tens place, and 1 in the ones place to get as close to 437 as I could. So I am going to need 4 volunteers who are willing to help us with this activity today. And you're going to need to use a virtual die roller, which I am going to drop the link for in the chat. And you're going to need to use your annotation tool. So if you're willing to be a volunteer for us, I'm going to ask you to use the annotation feature and write your name in one of the numbered boxes in the volunteer column on the screen, so we know you're willing to volunteer for us. And then once you've done that, you can grab the die roller and start rolling your 3 numbers and fill them in the tens, hundreds, one spot. So I got any volunteers? If you don't want to use the annotation tool, if we don't get another volunteer, I'm also happy to use the annotation tool for you. If you want to put in the chat what you rolled, we can get you filled in that way too. I got 2, I think. Got somebody else who's willing to give it a try? Donna's gonna play? Okay, you're in, Donna. Okay, I think I got a quorum now. So we've got Laurie, Sherry, Donna, Wynn, and Ruth. You guys are in. And Dormitria, you may be in too. So start rolling, get us your 3 numbers so we can see what you organize them into, how close you got to 437. See who's gonna get the closest. Laurie's got 556, that's the first number. Who can get closer than that? That's pretty close.
Okay, hang on. So I got a 5 for my first roll, but how do I put it on here? This is Donna.
Donna, you got a 5. So I will write your name right down here in spot 4.
Okie doke.
Giantly. And you got a 5 as your first number?
Mm-hmm. And then I got a 3. And I have a 2.
Okay. So there you go. You got a 5, a 3, and a 2.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Paula says that she got 362. That's pretty close. Oh, but Sherry Swint got 442. I think Sherry might be the winner. Yeah. Okay, we got 466. 421. Oh boy. This is a pretty close game. I still think, unless I missed somebody, tell me if I missed you, but I think that Sherry, you're the winner. Nice job. So there's our applause for Sherry. Very nice job. But that's not really the whole point here right this moment. So I'm going to keep moving. Luck of the roll. It is a little bit, but let's think about this. What skills could this activity teach? Because it is a little luck of the roll, you're right. But what can students learn through this activity? Think about the design. What skills are really truly embedded there? Can you see any? Graphing, you could do graphing, right? You could have them graph out the numbers on a number line, number order, absolutely. Place values. There you go. Number sense, place value again, absolutely. And so these are skills that are important. And even though you're doing them in a way that's fun, that's kind of goofy, I mean, you could do a whole tournament with this, right? You could have kids play against each other, right? Moving up and down if they win, greater than, less than. Oh boy, yes, you guys are on a roll now. And so in simple versions, and I'm sure you could expand on this more, you're talking about addition, place value, and sequence, right? Those are the things that we're seeing as we talk about this challenge. And as we say, okay, the 437 challenge does this. This game can be directly connected to some K-2 standards for development. So we're going to look at some examples. So the first one that we looked at is fluently add and subtract within 100, right? That's an important part of this. We need our students to be able to check answers that are close, right? Adding and subtracting to see which one is actually the closest. I did it in my head. You all were doing it along with me pretty naturally. But for some of our students, that's learning, that's progress, and they need to practice that. Or counting within 1,000, right? For some of them, it's an even bigger step. They didn't need to just check the ones that were like in the 300 and 400 range, right? They needed to go further than that. Or understanding the 3 digits in the hundreds, tens, and ones place. And so this is one of those things that you could make some connections with the standards. But let's go a little bit further and think about what we actually mean when we say the standards, because this is one of the things that as we visit with programs, I get to go a lot of places and see a lot of programs and talk to a lot of people about what they're doing in their program. Standards is one of the things that we can get stuck in when we think about aligning with the school day, because we think we have to be doing the exact same activity as what the kids are doing in school. They have to see that direct connection. But our students don't have to see this connection. And so this video shows you a little bit about why.
We all need the Common Core state standards to make sure that students are prepared for college and the real world.
Why?
Well, the standards make sure you're really exercising your brain when learning things like fractions or reading and writing about books by famous authors.
I'm reading James and the Giant Peach.
And while you read that, a student in another school may be reading Charlotte's Web, but you'll both be learning to read carefully, looking for clues, like a detective.
I'm a good detective.
I'll bet you are. I bet you'll be good at meeting these standards, too.
And so this is the picture of what we want to do. Just like they talk in this video about what different schools are doing, we can approach them in different ways. And we can have the great hook that maybe whatever the students did in school didn't hook their attention, didn't catch their interest, and so that they didn't really learn it. And we have the opportunity to do that too, do it the same standard through a different method to make that connection. The other thing that it is important to think about as we decide which standards we're going to use and as we incorporate them into what we're doing is this. Many times we can look at test scores and we can say what students need to learn, what standards they need to improve on, but we need to integrate that into every aspect of what we're doing. So you might find standards like fluently adding and subtracting within 100 or counting within 1,000, right? Those are 2 that we've looked at already today. You might see following agreed upon rules for discussion. That's a standard. Or writing opinion pieces. Those are standards, right? I'm using simple language to talk about it, but the reality is all of those are things that we do in our out of school time programs, and we just have to do them with intentionality. When we think about academics, we want to use every moment of our time, the precious time we have after school or in the summer with our students. And so we can think about how we can build academics and what our students need into every aspect of what we're doing. So, for example, when your students come into your program after school, or they come in the morning and they're chatty, they're talking over one another, they're in a hurry to talk to each other about their day, they want to tell you about something that happened, something cool they did, something they didn't like, develop and implement some agreed upon, as a group, rules for discussions and make them use them during this time. Make sure everybody gets a chance to share. That's development of a standard during that arrival time, or maybe you do that same activity during snack time, you have a conversation. And so one way you can do that is just being very intentional in creating each of your standards that you're choosing to work towards during that year. And hopefully you're aligning those with your data. You joined us last month, we talked a little bit about that, but drawing that in and then aligning it with every single thing that we do in our program. When we connect the academics and the activities with the standards, it doesn't have to decrease the fun. Instead, it draws learning into everything you're doing, and it helps you plan activities that are both fun at students' levels, and it strengthens the impact of your program. So let's look at the next piece. The next piece of this active alignment is facilitating 21st century learning. We really need to be programs that are more than focused on than just reading, on math, on science, on social studies. Those are important and we can't let them go, But there's another set of skills that it is our responsibility to consider that supports students in learning what's happening during the school day, and that helps them be better students when they do go to school. And those skills are called 21st century skills. And there are 4 of them. There's collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. And we're going to talk about each of these and give you some little simple activities that you can steal if you want or try if you want as you embed these in your programs. But think about when you build each of these 4 21st century skills, the 4 C's into your program, you then prepare students to be more successful when they go to math class, when they go to reading, when they go to social studies or science. And they're also skills that are applicable not just to academic learning, but really to their future. So let's look at these a little bit more. The first is communication. And it's an important aspect of learning for students to be able to learn from communication, so to receive communication, and then also to express communication. And some researchers believe that the best way for teachers to encourage communication from all students, to make sure everybody gets a chance to share, is really working in discussion or small group work. There's also learning that occurs when you have to teach or explain a concept to anyone else. When you have to explain something to someone else, you solidify that skill. You know it better. And when we encourage and give opportunities for our students to do that, they too become better communicators. On the flip side, the listening student also has benefits. When students listen to each other, they often benefit from hearing concepts expressed in ways that might be closer to their own way of thinking, right? We are good at talking teacher talk, right? We're good at adult talk. And even if we're good at communicating with our students, to have their peer express something in a way that is very familiar to them can be very beneficial. So I'm going to give you an activity that you might decide you want to use with your students or might not. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is right now, either grab a piece of paper, a pencil, open a blank Word document. You can open paint or paintbrush, something where you can draw something. Okay, something where you can create something. You're going to get your creative skills ready to go. So you need either paper and pencil if that's how you like to do it. If you need to write it down on hand, that's okay. Or open paint or paintbrush or pages, something that you can use to do a little art. Okay. And all I'm going to tell you before I get started is that we're going to draw a cat. Okay. So we're going to draw a cat. And I'm going to read you the steps that are on the screen. But if you get behind me, don't worry. You can just look up, figure out where you are, and just move along. Okay. So the first one is you're going to draw a circle for the head. Okay. So draw your circle. Then draw 2 triangles for the ears. Okay, now you're going to add 3 lines on each side of the head to show the whiskers. Think about a cat. Right? Then draw yourself 2 circles for the eyes. Now I want you to use an upside down triangle for the nose. And add 2 curved lines to make the mouth. Okay, hopefully you have a head going on now. Now I want you to use an oval to add the body. Use 2 small circles to draw the feet and an arc for the tail. Okay, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to add any color, any details that you want. We're not looking for beautiful art for this activity. Okay. And then if you're brave, maybe you'll share it with us. Oh, I see one. Oh, there we go. I see one. Thanks, Laurie. There we go. Who else do I have? Anybody else feeling brave to share your cat? Want to see my cat? Here's my cat. I did mine digitally. He's not beautiful. He's there. So, what language skills were used in this activity? What did I ask you to do? Think back to how we started. Following directions, yes. Was everybody reading, or did some of you use your listening skills, your auditory listening skills? There you go. Vocab, I'm so glad somebody said that. There was some nice, good math vocab in there, right? Yep, some good audio skills. Some of you used reading, the visual piece, right? Some of you needed to read it, you needed to see it. Now, what would have happened if I had given you some more details or shown you my pieces as I'd gone along? I could have given you more clues. I really resisted the temptation to like give you some hints about where I thought things should go, like the ears, right? To give you the whiskers, or to tell you that the eyes should be small, or maybe like if you got to the mouth and you were like, how do I use the two curved lines to make the mouth, right? Whatever it was that you were thinking about, I could have added more clues, but I also gave you some critical thinking in there, some other things that I'm going to get to in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. But you can see how an activity like this, that's fun, that's creative, and that students could spend a whole lot more time on than we just did in this couple minutes that we have in our session today, is an important part of engaging learners in communication. It gets them practicing language without it being a language activity, right? I don't think most of you felt like, oh, here we're doing reading again. Oh, here we're right? You have to feel that. And kids need meaningful ways to use language. They need opportunities to use language to do a task or solve a problem. And in doing so, they're learning and they're building their communication skills. They may need to learn about culture and communication, or develop their ability to work in teams, to cooperate, to collaborate, to problem solve, and more is all part of communication and what it looks like. And so building that into our programs will help students be more successful in the classroom, and is one way we can actively align what we're doing with what their teachers are teaching them in school. The next is creativity, right? Creative thinking involves searching for meaningful connections by generating original, varied possibilities, something different, expanding, enriching. Creative thinking generates further possibilities. It's not just one answer. It's not the craft project, right? And I say that because have you ever been in one of those places in a classroom where somebody's leading a craft project and then they come around and help each student and they want every craft to look exactly the same? Yeah, that's not creativity. That's not what I'm talking about. It's where students have the opportunity to express and be different and unique through what I would call the art of possibilities. There's not a rightness or a wrongness of answers. It's really an openness in that. Most video games follow all the same plot line. Bear with me a minute, because you're saying, how can that be? But really, there's a hero. He or she goes on a quest. They face challenges in order to resolve the quest. But video games with the same plot line can look so different based on different worlds, different characters, the challenges that are faced by the hero. And this is where creative thinking comes in. It's creative environments that allow students to bring together existing ideas into new configurations, to develop new properties, possibilities for something that already exists, or discovering or imagining something that's entirely new. So I want you to think about that video game, right? I want you to imagine that you're going to have your own students design their own video game, in fact. And they talk about the hero, and they talk about the villain and the quest and the challenges that the hero faces, the location. How can you encourage creativity with this activity? And then what academic skills can an activity like this support? Well, I'll show you something very simple. And maybe some of you aren't thinking there yet, but I taught English. My brain has gone here already. The hero and villain, oh yeah, those are characters. And the quests and challenges, there's the plot. And the location, the world that it's set on, that's the setting, right? And so we're thinking academic, we're building academic skills in our students, while at the same time, they're learning about doing it in a way that's creative. And so again, they don't feel like they're doing a language art activity, and they're building those creativity skills, yet they're also practicing those skills that align with what's happening in the school day, with what they need to know. And if you want to take this activity to the next level, let them create the video game, right? Have those STEM skills pulled right on in. There's all kinds of platforms available out there, things that you can do where you just draw in those skills to have students actually create that video game. And there's so many creative ways that you could approach that. But it's important that students are learning to be creative and that we're giving them opportunity to do that. The next is critical thinking. So critical thinking is compared to creativity, involves examining possibilities carefully, fairly, constructively. It focuses your thoughts, it analyzes possibilities, it ranks or prioritizes options. It's analytical in nature, and it focuses on eliminating possibilities and converges really on a single answer. It's where you come to this is right or this is wrong. So it's principally objective in thought. It's more focused in that way. And so I'll give you an example of what I mean. I want you to take a minute to determine how many quarters you would have to stack up to reach the top of the Empire State Building. Okay. When you have the answer, you can give us a thumbs up, give us a reaction, but I'm going to say don't share it in the chat yet because we don't want to spoil it for those who need a minute. Okay. I did leave you some hints down at the bottom of the screen, some information that you need. A quarter is 1.75 millimeters, and then the Empire State Building is 381 meters. Okay. So once you think you have an answer, give us a thumbs up. You can, or drop it in the chat box and let us know, but don't give us the answer yet, so people who are still thinking can figure it out. Don't be afraid. If you need to grab your phones, you can. Anybody need a hint? Got another hint for you if you need one more. I predict the needed hint is that 1 meter equals 1,000 millimeters. Is that the hint you needed? I got one right answer. Let's see. So if you are one of those people who finished, you can figure out how much would those quarters cost. I got another right answer. So for those of you who just sent me a right answer in the chat, direct message style, you can figure out how much would those quarters cost? What are they worth? And I got some good math too on what the quarters are worth. So some of you are starting to come to right answers or close to right answers. I will give you the correct answer because some of you are like, I need to know if my answer is right. I can see it in your question marks. I just got like 4 question marks from somebody. So you would need 217,714 quarters, which would cost $54,428. Okay, $54,428. So that's a lot of quarters. Now, I mean, if you were doing this with your kids, you weren't doing it online, I might pass you a ruler, make you measure how wide the quarter is, right? I might make you start stacking up some quarters, see how high you can stack them. I might make you tell me how many quarters it takes to measure the chair next door, the building with tape measure outside, right? You could do all kinds of things and blow it up to the next level. But you're building those critical thinking skills and you're getting them thinking about something that's big, that's dramatic. This activity uses much more critical thinking than creating your superhero world where we were being creative. There's a right and a wrong answer, but students also need to build skills that come from activities like these. So I want you to think back on the 4 skills that we just talked about, the 4 21st century skills. And I want you to think about, how are you currently incorporating 21st century skills into your program? So I'd love to have you share in the chat box how you're doing that. If I had a few people, 1 or 2 people who wanted to unmute and say your really cool idea that you're doing, we would love to hear that. You guys are the experts. You guys are doing these things. I visited a program recently where they were working really hard to build a garden, and their gardens, they have this little like patio thing that they have going on outside, and they have all kinds of seeds that they're growing in the windows. They had seedlings that they were growing in their windows as part of this, but they had also painted all of the beds, and then they had these big stones that they had painted. So they had this creative component of what they were doing. As part of the plants that they were growing inside, they were measuring them on a regular basis and tracking their growth, right? They were doing the more critical thinking components. And they had a plan to invite families at the end of their summer program to come and view the garden and all the plants that were going, and the students were going to do a presentation about it, and they were going to have the opportunity to communicate what they were learning and doing, right? And what a beautiful program that really draws in each aspect of what they're doing into that. And you guys are doing those things. You guys are being creative in those ways. It's just about being intentional and actively aligning those things instead of being passive in our alignment, right? A lot of times we're saying, oh, well, I'm doing that. Yep, so let's do it intentionally. Let's be active in our alignment with what's happening in school so that we can support the learning that's occurring. Let's look at the last one. The last one is good communication. It's how we're connecting with what's happening in the schools. And this may be the hardest one because the other ones you can do without support. You can say, I'm going to do this in my program. This is what we're going to be about. And this is the piece where sometimes we get stuck because it requires both give and take with schools. And some of you have phenomenal relationships with your schools, and some of you really struggle. And maybe even that's why you're here, because you're struggling with your relationship, with your connection with the schools. So I'll start by asking you this question. What's your current relationship with school day staff like? So how often do you communicate with staff at the school? Is that daily? Is it every few days? Is it weekly, monthly, as needed, less than monthly? What does that look like? And who are you communicating with also plays a role. I had one school where the only person we ever communicated with was the secretary. Okay, Laurie's got a goal. That's a great goal. Awesome relationship at one site. That's interesting that it's more right before summer. That's great. That means you're drawing and connecting in those students who you need to connect with. So as you think about that and as you're planning your communication, one of the important things to think about is identifying what good communication is going to look like. And so I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about as you make that journey. So one is, what support do you really need for program improvement? Sometimes the communication that occurs is just happening at some programs and places that I get to see. It's just happening to do the due diligence. we need to look instead at how we're really going to improve both our programs and the program goals of the places that we're visiting, so that we're supporting the school's goals, because what we're working towards is the same, right? We want our students to be young people who are successful, who are growing academically, who are making progress, and so do the schools. And so we really need to connect in those places with the schools and talk about that. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is look for ways to add value. Sometimes programs, especially if you're a 21st century program, you start to feel like, man, every time I'm coming in, I'm asking you for data and more data. Oh, and to fill out this survey and more data. And that data is important to what we do. But just like you're busy and your program needs what you need to be successful, it's important to demonstrate that what you're doing can help them support what they're doing in the long run. And so this makes working with you worth their time, worth their energy. I have visited a program this summer, and one of the things that they are planning to do is do a regular progress report to the principals to say, hey, here's the way these students are making progress, just as a way of, I'm not asking you for anything, because pretty much when I send you something, I'm asking you, but here's the success, here's the win. And they've said that really when they're done that, at the end of that report, they're going to say to the principals, what else can we do to support what's happening in school? And I said to them that that's a beautiful way to communicate with your principals, a beautiful way to connect with the schools, and to start to show the value of what you're doing to them, because that's been one of the challenges that they face. And then the last thing I would say is start small and use SMART goals. You've probably, if you've spent much time with us at Foundations, you've probably heard somebody talk about SMART goals along the way, but it would be important to take your time and look in detail at what your program can do to document that progress. It's how you put together those principal reports, and it's how you document that your students are being successful. And so share those goals with the school so that they know what you're working on, that you can say, hey, here's the progress that we're making in this. And then look for some ways to connect. Look for some ways that you can say, hey, we're going to be present. We're going to be part of this community. We're going to be engaged in what you're doing. It's not all about just our program or what we're doing, but it's about you and the school too. And this takes work, and we're busy people. But I have found that when you do that really intentionally over time, that building those connections, building those relationships end up making a positive impact for everybody involved. I'll tell you a story. So this was probably 4 winters ago now. I was running a program and had built a decent relationship with a principal. And they called me on a Tuesday morning at like 6 a.m., which I didn't answer my phone, but called them back in a couple of minutes. And the pipes at the school had burst, and they had already been closed the afternoon prior because of that. And they had just been told that they were going to have to be closed for 2 weeks before they could have any kids back in school. Yeah. This was the winter before COVID. So like we weren't used to, hey, you're going to be closed for 2 weeks in the middle of the school year. And they called and said, hey, is there anything you can do? Well, we ended up playing host to school for 2 weeks because I ran a program where we had our own facility and space, and they ran school in our building for 2 weeks. And it was a wild 2 weeks, don't get me wrong. But that relationship ended up to be a really positive thing for our students. And because that principal knew we were there, they knew we were committed to the students in the community, they even bothered to reach out. And you want to be in that place, because even if it's a hard work of crazy 2 weeks of having school and then after school programs or whatever it looks like, knowing that you're there to support can help create opportunities for continued development of your programs. And let me tell you, that principal was on board from then on out. We knew if we picked up that phone and called that principal, there was no question anything we asked would happen, because we took the time, we built the relationship, and we showed up. But I'm going to give you some simpler ones, because that only happens once in a great while, where you have the pipes burst and kids are going to be out of school and all that. So some things to think about. Plan activities related to school or classroom themes. Some schools have an annual theme. Sometimes high schools have a book that they read. Or even grade levels will have a theme for the grade, or even a classroom, right? You may have a teacher who picks a theme for their classroom. Use those as you plan activities. Jump into it and connect with the teacher. Just send them a picture when you're done. Send them something cool to say, hey, we noticed this, we connect, and we want to connect. It doesn't all have to be about the ads. Coordinate with teachers on checking homework. Many of us have online platforms that we can use to communicate about homework, right? The schools have all these different things, but make sure that that you continue that good communication and that you check those things, but you also talk to the teachers, see what they need, see what's happening. You may also want to consider working with your school day partners to access texts that students are using. So I had one school that I worked with where the principal would give me a copy of every reading book, math book, science book, and social studies book, like one for each grade level, that she would give us those so that we could know if we went online and saw that so-and-so had homework and they say, oh, I forgot my book. Oh, guess what? We got a book for you. And so doing that, I see an example where they use the themes that they're teaching during the school day in your character education program. Like, that's great. That's what I'm talking about. Those connections make such a difference. You can connect with school day partners in all kinds of ways. Another one is around behavior expectations and school regulations. And if you're a school-based program, you may find that just using the school's rules can support that transition between the school day and program. But if you're not in a school, you may find that you have to have different rules, maybe that align with your procedures or something else. But understanding the rules can help you understand students' responses. I had a site coordinator who called me and was saying to me that she does not understand what's happening. We had just started partnering with this one school, and she had been a site coordinator for me for several years. And she says, the kids from the school, when I come in the room and call them to come see me, they come out crying. And she's somebody who had a background. She's a social worker. She was accustomed to just checking in with the students in that way. And these kids, especially the little ones, would come out so upset. And as we began to investigate and learn, we quickly learned that those students, if they got called in the hall at school, that meant that they were going to the principal's office and they were in trouble. And so we learned that with them created a conflict in just our understanding of their process and their procedure around discipline, made us adjust what we were doing so that we could build those positive relationships with students that we wanted to. And so just checking in and understanding that even if you're not going to use the same policies and procedures, if they're not a good fit for your program around behavior and around regulations, then to make sure that you understand what they are. So when the responses are not what you expect, you can respond appropriately. It's also important to learn about long-term projects that schools are focused on and help support their program. So you may be thinking about what they're doing and saying, hey, we're going to be part of that. We're going to do that too. You know, a true partnership isn't just about you asking for what you want, but really giving as much as you take. I'd also encourage you to be included in a school's emergency plan. If your school-based program, it's essential to the safety of your students, right? That there's a plan for what happens after hours, that you know how to respond, or your site coordinators know how to respond so that everyone's safe when those who are in those key roles go home, all that. But if you're not a school-based program, it's also important. You could provide an evacuation site for a school, kind of like we did with the flood, or you may support in case of emergency. I've had times when schools have closed early, like last minute emergency, whether for weather or for other things, and have gotten contacted and said, hey, we're going to drop kids off at your program. And that's important for us to be part of that loop and that communication early while they're making the plan, because usually they're making the plan and then they inform everybody. And if you're part of that team where you're in the plan to know early, you can get your staff there. You can be ready, right, for those things to happen. The last, next one is attend PTA meetings. Just show up. These can be opportunities for recruitment. So if you need to recruit kids, that's a way to do it. but they can also be opportunities to learn about student and family needs. I had one school where I went to PTA meetings for several years at that school. The parents were really involved. They were really communicative. They loved their PTA meetings because the principal would show up and talk about what was going on with them. And it created such an opportunity for me to connect with those families and with that principal. And it ended up being a really positive impact on our program. And then finally, support school activities, show up to them, attend games, family events, show up at what the school is doing, make your presence known, offer to volunteer, but also maybe you can put a table up, maybe you can talk about what you do. Be present so that you can talk to families, so that you can talk to teachers, so that you're available for questions, so that you're available for feedback. Building those connections, building those relationships will help you improve what you're doing in your program. So as we are almost ready to wrap up for today, I'd love to hear your best ideas for communicating with school day staff and one way you want to improve your communication with school day staff. Do you have something that you are doing that as you communicate with school day staff works phenomenally? Do you have something that you're like, this is a win and everybody should know that? Please let us know, right? We want to hear the wins. We want to hear what's really, really working. So as we share that, as we wrap up, I'd love to hear your ideas. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about, what's working for you. Share them with the group. But when we think about active alignment, just remember that high quality after school and expanded learning programs see the kind of results that they can thrive, that they can achieve all that they want to through good communication around common goals, through active alignment in the education of what we're doing. So it's been a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you all today. Thank you for your engagement. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. If you're looking for any of our resources, Paula has shared some links with you guys in the chat. Feel free to send me an email, and I'm going to pass it back to Elizabeth just to wrap up for us today.
Thanks, Hilary. This was another great webinar. I didn't realize you could just see the top of my head. We're so happy that everybody could take some time out of their busy schedules to join us for another one of our webinar series. Please come back next Wednesday. We have free professional development for you every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. Paula has shared a feedback survey, or the link for the feedback survey. Please take a minute to fill that out. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And join us at the Beyond School Hours Conference in February, the 9th through the 12th. The registration is open. We're looking forward to seeing everybody back in person. And if you are able to do so, please consider joining us. The link for that information is also in the chat. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.